As President Donald Trump heads to the G7 summit in Canada this Monday, other world leaders are ready to prove they won't be intimidated by his threats and unpredictability. For years, Trump has relied on strong-arm tactics to pressure America's allies, threatening stiff tariffs, joking about taking over Canada and Greenland, and even hinting he might abandon NATO's promise to defend partners under attack. In private meetings, he's tried to intimidate leaders from Ukraine to South Africa. But today, many world leaders believe Trump's threats are more bark than bite. In fact, a recent analysis shows that out of 22 times Trump publicly threatened military action since his first term, the U.S. has only used force twice. Leaders are now pushing back, carefully but clearly. In Canada, Prime Minister Mark Carney said, "America is no longer the world's predominant force," blaming Trump's tariffs for damaging a decades-old partnership. Carney reminded everyone that while the U.S. dominated after the Berlin Wall fell, Trump's transactional approach has weakened America's moral leadership. Today, the United States is beginning to monetize its hegemony, charging for market access and cutting its share of security responsibilities. In France, President Emmanuel Macron still calls the U.S. a friend and ally, but says France won't be bossed around daily by one person's whims. Speaking in Singapore last month, Macron warned that forcing countries to pick sides between the U.S. and China could break down the post-World War II global order. Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba also objects to Trump's higher tariffs, saying they could slow growth. He even called Trump ahead of the summit, partly to wish him a happy birthday, but mainly to secure a private meeting on the sidelines, which Tokyo says is more important than the summit itself. To show subtle resistance, Macron even planned a visit to Greenland before the summit, as a gesture of European unity in the face of Trump's past comments about buying the island. Meanwhile, the summit won't produce a joint statement like in the past. A senior Canadian official says the G7 couldn't get Trump to agree on common language, so each leader will release their own statements instead. Back in the U.S., Senator Jeanne Shaheen says this summit is a chance for Trump to mend ties so that China can't exploit G7 divisions. But she also says her conversations with foreign leaders confirm they're not intimidated by Trump's behavior. Some leaders, though, are still trying to charm Trump where possible. Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer keeps him focused on NATO and Ukraine, and even brought an invitation from King Charles III for a state visit. Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz had a cordial White House meeting with Trump recently, but Berlin says the real test is whether they can work together with the whole G7 team. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni tries to act as a bridge between Trump and Europe, but she's caught between Italy's firm support for Ukraine and Trump's tariff threats against European goods. A tough spot for the only European leader who attended Trump's inauguration. Outside the G7, global crises add to the tension. Israel's attack on Iran has raised new security concerns, just as leaders gather to tackle the world's toughest problems. Mark Sobel of the Official Monetary and Financial Institutions Forum says Trump's trade policies, backing for Europe's far right, and preference for dealing with authoritarians all push America's allies further away. Even if he's right that Europe should spend more on defense, his style creates friction. Behind the scenes, despite any photo ops, this Kananaskis summit will highlight a fragmented G7 and a drifting global economy. As world leaders gather in the Canadian Rockies, one thing is clear: more than ever, they're ready to stand their ground. Stay tuned to today's Blueprint News for more real updates on global politics. If you found this report useful, please like, share, and hit that subscribe button. Let's keep the world informed together.